Welcome. This is the Contreras Report. I am Raul Lowry Contreras, your correspondent. Let's start with the war in Ukraine. Then we'll have Washington Post writers group Ruben Navarrete, writer. He will join us to discuss a world on the verge of World War III. We will wrap up this program with news from Mexico that affects the United States. Number one, it has been over a month since Russian dictator Vladimir Putin ordered his army to invade Ukraine, the next-door neighbor to Russia. The lead-up for the invasion took weeks of troop movements to the border between Ukraine and Russia. Despite that lead-up, the invasion came as a mild surprise to many, especially to former President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Former President Donald Trump says that he thought the troop movements were leading up to negotiations with Ukraine about border problems. Putin's goal, Trump thinks, was the show of force was made to make Ukraine a Russian client state like Belarus or Armenia by negotiating a surrender by Ukraine of eastern Ukrainian provinces occupied by majority Russian speakers. Trump also comments that Vladimir didn't invade Ukraine while Trump was president, as if that was an accomplishment. Trump doesn't explain why he thinks that Putin didn't invade Ukraine during the Trump presidency, but facts are that Putin felt close to Trump, that because Trump publicly contradicted the U.S. intelligence community by declaring that Putin and Russia did not interfere with the 2016 election, and that Russia had no reason to interfere in that election, why would Putin do something that Trump didn't expect? Trump forgot that he himself called on Russia to look for Hillary Clinton's missing emails. He also forgot that his own campaign manager surreptitiously supplied Russian agents with confidential campaign information, and that it is proven Russia stole material from the Democratic National Committee and made the stolen material public, all in an effort to embarrass Democrats and to help Donald J. Trump run for president. Putin, says Trump, was a genius to invade Ukraine under cover of demanding that majority Russian speakers in eastern Ukraine be recognized as free republics on their own, or Russian protected states. He since has abandoned words. Trump has abandoned his use of the word genius that he applied to Putin after the invasion started. And now he uses a less controversial word, calling Putin, quote, smart, unquote, instead. Trump also brags that he sent many weapons to Ukraine despite the fact that he, in fact, stopped weapons from being delivered to Ukraine, at least temporarily. He also asked the Ukrainian government to investigate a Ukrainian company with the son of the American Vice President, Joseph Biden, on its board of directors. The son was named Biden. He was and is Joe Biden's son. Trump claims that some shenanigans were going on here. Now remember, one of the reasons why Trump was impeached was because he withheld sending appropriated weaponry approved by the Congress to the Ukraine. Trump was only the third president in U.S. history to be impeached by the House of Representatives, and the reason was he held up, among other things, weapons to Ukraine. He was impeached for delaying weapons delivery to Ukraine. Trump, the only anti-NATO president ever, did his best to break up NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, while in the White House. He still speaks ill of NATO and the USA's current commander-in-chief of the U.S. military, and even suggested more than once that the United States might never honor the NATO agreement that every NATO nation will come to the defense of any attack on any NATO member. You know, you will recall that NATO joined the United States in its war on terror after the attack of September 11th 2001. His NATO attacks rebounded. They came back to bite Trump, you know where. His accusations that many NATO countries owed the organization as dues did little to affect countries that didn't pull their own weight. The agreement was to spend 2% of their budgets on defense. That's what he referred to when they didn't, and made it look like it was a 2% formula for dues payment into a central treasury, like a club membership. Trump had no idea of what NATO was and is about. President Joe Biden is the exact opposite of Trump on the questions regarding NATO and defending member countries. That is not what Vladimir Putin was thinking while he prepared to invade and conquer the Ukraine, which is not a NATO member, but has been trying to get into NATO for a dozen years. He thought that most Americans thought like Trump, isolationists, no foreign adventures. That thinking was that the U.S. would not react to an invasion. Further, that the U.S. would not dare confront mighty Russia because of Russia's possession of nuclear weapons and a crackerjack army that Russians thought is invincible, perhaps as great as it was in successfully fighting off Nazis 80 years ago. Successfully, that is, because the United States supplied weaponry and supplies that kept the Soviet Union alive, as did oil from Azerbaijan that the Nazis failed to steal for themselves. You will recall that the Germans and their allies, Romania and Hungary, sent an entire army south to capture the oil fields of Baku, which supplied 95% of the oil Russia used to fight in the war. Well, the Nazis got stalled when they made the mistake of falling off of their trail to attack Baku, to attack Stalingrad, because Hitler thought it would be a feather in his cap to capture a city named for his opponent in Moscow, Joseph Stalin. Well, we all know what happened at Stalingrad. 300,000 or so Germans were either killed, wounded, or captured or surrendered. History has begun treating the one-month-old war, Russia versus invasion of Ukraine, as a strategic failure. In the words of the street, the Russian army is a flop. The Russian army is not the army of 1945. It is staffed with conscripts, 18-year-old kids that are forced to serve at least a year. Most are there because they need the money. They need that army pay because Russia's 160 million people don't produce a great economy. Russia is an economic flop. Where is Russia going? Let's look at 2050, 28 years from now. International economists make the following list of what they expect to be the 10 richest countries in the world in 2050. Number 10, they say, will be Canada. Number 9, France. Number 8, Mexico. Number 7, Brazil. Number 6, the United Kingdom. Number 5, Germany. Remember, Mexico will have a larger economy than Germany. Number 4 is Japan, or will be Japan. Number 3, India. Number 2, the United States. And number 1, China. So, in noting that Mexico will be a far larger and healthier economy in 2050, the idea that Russia has a future is outside the estimates or even the imaginations of experts. Russia is a dead country walking. Mexico's gross domestic product today, the GDP, is $2.4 trillion worth of goods and services. Russia's GDP, $1.48 trillion worth of goods and services. More clues that Russia is a dead country walking. Vladimir Putin surely expected his troops would roll all over the Ukraine like it did in 2008 when it invaded the Republic of Georgia. He counted on his 150,000 plus troops to be crackerjack troops, terrific world warriors when they crossed into Ukraine, complete with modern weaponry, missiles, and old-fashioned tanks. He expected to have air superiority because he has a real air force. Wrong. Glory to Ukraine. The Ukrainians fought back. The Russians didn't roll over the army of Ukraine. The Ukrainians fought back. Ukrainian men and others from all over Europe have flooded into Ukraine, where they are armed and organized to fight back. Ukraine's capital city, Kiev, is still free. Other cities in the south have been leveled to rubble by Russian artillery and bombs, and civilians are illegally attacked and killed. Children are killed by the mighty Russian army. Yet the Russian army flops. On the Russian side, 6 commended, full medal-laden Russian generals have been killed. Russians taken prisoner are criticizing Putin for ordering them to wipe out Ukraine for no reason. They wondered what they were doing in Ukraine. They thought they were there on maneuvers with the Ukrainian army. They are instead shooting at the Ukrainian army. Putin declares that Ukraine is run by Nazis, and rebutting the childlike statements of a young, unwise, conservative Trump worshiper, Candace Owens, Ukraine's President Zelensky is not a thug and not a Nazi. In fact, Zelensky, Ukraine's leader, is Jewish. Hard to be a Nazi when you're a Jewish person. Moreover, Ukraine, prior to 1918 and after 1920, has been owned by multiple countries like Slovakia, Russia, Lithuania, Poland, and after 1920, the Soviet Empire. Ukraine was a free country before the Soviet Empire swallowed it up. Candace Owens, pay attention to this. While Ukraine was an independent country that crawled out of the ashes of the Russian Empire to govern itself, it was swallowed up by the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR, and suffocated under communist rule until 1990, when the local parliament declared independence from the Soviet Union. One historical note that even Candace Owens should know, the Soviet Empire attempted to break the capitalist Ukraine spirit, the spirit that recognized private property, privately owned farmland, and in particulars in the 1930s, was punished by Russia by deliberately starving the Ukrainian people. Remember that, Candace Owens, the Russians didn't create the Ukraine, but they tried to kill it. An estimated 3 to 10 million Ukrainians died in the Joseph Stalin orchestrated famine. This reminds one of what England did to Ireland. They destroyed the crops in Ireland so that the people would starve. It's called the potato famine. Many countries have signed onto a formal description of the 2 or 3 year famine that caused so many deaths. They refer to it as, by definition, genocide. And so, Ukrainians live and breathe glory to Ukraine and fight back. We free people must support these fighting people with anything that can help them. We need to make sure they can get their hands on Russian-made jet fighter bombers, more missiles, more ammunition, and food. While we have to be careful not to incite more trouble with Russia, because they do have nuclear weapons and chemical weapons, we have to stand tall and not live off a brief period of our president loving Russia and Putin. We must recall what candidate for president Mitt Romney stated during the 2012 presidential race that he was made so much fun of when he made this statement. He said, Russia is our #1 concern, our #1 adversary, and he was right, and Putin is proving that. Vladimir Putin is trying to resurrect the Soviet Empire. He must be stopped. The Ukrainians are doing just that at the moment. In the second month of this unprovoked war, can they continue to make the Russians look like paper tigers? And can they make Vladimir Putin look like an unwise leader who simply bit off more than he and his powder puff army can survive? We will be right back. We're going to take a break. And when we come back, we'll have Ruben Nafaret, a writer from the Washington Post Writers Group, and then we'll discuss events in Mexico that affect the United States of America on an everyday basis, and certainly affect the war in Europe, because Mexico is taking sides, and it's not on the side of Ukraine. It's on the side of Russia. It even had the Russian ambassador meet with the Mexican Congress so that he could compliment them on not sanctioning Russia like the US, Canada, and every civilized country of Western Europe has done. So we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Thank you. We'll see you.